And I'm Nicole Davidson. I'm the CEO and founder of Beacon HR. If you'll indulge me for a very, very quick intro, and then I promise we'll jump right into the content. We've got so much great content for you today. I started Beacon HR 8 years ago, and we specialize in fractional HR and recruitment services for small and medium-sized businesses across Canada. I am super excited to introduce our two fantastic speakers today. First up is Char Stark. She's a people and talent partner at Beacon HR. Char is really well known for delivering an exceptionally high work quality. She's all about results. And she brings a highly empathetic, people-centered approach while also balancing the needs of the business. Char is also known as a thought leader in our industry. Next up, we'll have Dane Christensen, who's a partner at Informa Financial. Dane has partnered with hundreds and hundreds of businesses across Canada to provide really exceptional right fit benefits and insurance solutions. Dane is a longtime friend of Beacon and really excited for you to get to hear all of the insight that he's going to share. Dane is also really known within the tech ecosystem in Vancouver, but also outside of BC as somebody who is a super connector. He also has expertise across industries. Quick reminder for everyone, we do have about 100 people joining today, so if you could please make sure you leave yourself on mute. And with that, I will pass it off to our first speaker. Char, over to you.
Thanks so much for the introduction, Nicole. Excited to get us started here. So for today, what I'm going to be taking us through are first the pillars of total rewards. Then I'm going to jump into some generational insights, and I'm going to wrap up my section with some trends from 2025 on how to retain employees. Then I'm going to hand it over to Dane to talk us through what good is in benefits management, how to time your benefits review, and a little bit about how benefits have evolved and what you can expect in 2025 for benefits trends before we hand it over to all of you for our Q&A. Awesome. Okay, so what is total rewards? Total rewards is made up of compensation, benefits, work-life integration, learning and development, and performance recognition. And today I want to propose to all of you that total rewards is a lot like a sandwich. So we all have our favorite kind, and some of us might go for a hearty club sandwich or prefer, let's say, a plant-based wrap. Myself, I love a classic grilled cheese. And essentially every organization offers their own unique sandwich with different ingredients that represent compensation, benefits, all of the different things in here. And just like sandwiches, the satisfaction that we're going to get often depends on how much we're taking advantage of what's offered and how much we can personalize what we're getting. So some layers might stand out more to some of us, but together they're always what creates something that's going to fuel us and sustain us. So let's dig into this analogy, lean into it with me, and we're going to talk about how to build a really satisfying total rewards package. So compensation, let's start with this. This is essentially the bread of our sandwich. It's the foundation that's holding everything together. Just like without bread, it's not a sandwich. Without compensation, it's not total rewards. So whether it's a hearty sourdough or a soft brioche, compensation is representing the essentials from base salary, bonuses, commissions, incentives. And all of this is going to create a really solid foundation. And in order to do that, we need to make sure that we're providing a competitive salary that's going to be competitive and equitable. These are both non-negotiables, and that's why we always want to be updating our salary bands, benchmarking against industry standards, and aligning internally to make sure our pay is equitable. I also want to quickly highlight that team and individual bonuses, as well as equity and stock options, are really valuable levers that we can pull to reward employees for how they're contributing individually to businesses. So just like a sandwich doesn't work without bread, compensation is the base of total rewards. It supports everything and holds everything together within the framework. Next up is benefits, and I pose that benefits are like the protein. So whether it's turkey, tofu, grilled chicken, This is the heart of the sandwich, and it's essentially providing us with that sustenance and substance that's going to make the meal complete. So, just like protein is kind of what fuels your body and is going to be benefiting employees' well being, and it's going to help them thrive both personally and professionally. So, thinking of benefits as this layer, it supports health, security, balance, and it's going to include things from health, dental, vision insurance, retirement saving plans, RSP matching, paid time off, wellness programs. Dane is going to get further into that later, but at a high level, for a truly satisfying sandwich or benefits package, it's really important that we're catering to everyone's diverse needs and tastes. So, offering options like HSAs, extended health and dental coverage, or EAPs are really what are going to provide that flexibility and tailored support for everyone's individual needs. So, offering that flexibility and personalization is really critical and really what we're going to hone in on here today. So, it's kind of like choosing if you want turkey on your sandwich or if you want tofu. And regularly reviewing and adjusting your offering for benefits is kind of like making sure your protein stays fresh. So, this is really important, and Dane is going to get into that more later. But essentially, without a strong protein layer, the sandwich and our total rewards framework is going to lack substance that employees need to kind of thrive. Now, work-life integration. This is the cheese of the sandwich. This is the element that's holding everything together and adding richness and balance. Essentially, it is going to ensure that employees feel supported and fulfilled both at work and when they're at home. So this can include things like flexible schedules, remote or hybrid work options, parental leave, caregiving resources, family support initiatives, and really by ensuring that we're fostering a culture that's prioritizing well-being and balance, organizations are creating the satisfying sandwich that aligns with their employees' needs and priorities. So without this layer, the employee experience is going to feel incomplete. And that's definitely how I feel about a sandwich without cheese as well. Learning and development, this is the fresh and crunchy veggies in the sandwich. This is the layer that's going to add balance, texture, nourishment. So just like vegetables kind of make the sandwich healthier and more fulfilling, L&D programs are what are going to fuel personal and professional growth. This layer encompasses everything from opportunities to learn from others, mentorship programs, pathways to promotions. All of these are what empower employees to really grow in their roles and prepare for their future. So just like veggies are bringing that fresh flavor to the sandwich and they're providing us with long-term digestive health, L&D is essentially enriching the employee experience by helping others achieve their goals. And without this layer, the sandwich is going to feel less satisfying, less crunchy. Now, last but definitely not least is performance recognition. And I propose that this is the sauce, the best part of the sandwich for a lot of people. And this is the flavor element that essentially ties everything together, and it's enhancing every single layer of the sandwich. So this includes everything from recognition programs, goal setting programs, regular check-ins with leaders who are really invested in their team members, where we're getting celebrations for contributions and we're getting feedback around how can we do better. So just like sauce brings that flavor to the sandwich, consistent and meaningful performance feedback and recognition really elevates and makes an employee's experience stand out as different. So without this, the sandwich, let's say, loses its full impact because it doesn't have that extra oomph. So now that I've taken you through this analogy and we have an understanding of what our sandwich is made of and these different layers, let's get into who and how we can cater our sandwich to with each of the different generations in the workforce. So I'm gonna go into this, and first I wanna highlight who are these different generations. So jumping right in, first we have traditionalists. These are people who were born before 1946. We're actually not going to spend a ton of time here today because this is less than 1% of the working population, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time there. Next up is baby boomers. These are folks born between 1946 and 1964. Then we've got Gen X between 1965 and 1980. Millennials between 1981 and 1996. This is me, so I'm here to represent today. And then last but definitely not least, we have Gen Z, who's born between 1997 and 2012. Now, we're going to talk about each of these generations and what they prefer when it comes to total rewards. And as I'm going through this, I really would encourage you to think about what are the demographics at your own workplace and how might your total rewards resonate with them, with what I'm sharing. So let's start off with Gen Z. This is definitely the one that I'm seeing in the news most often right now, and they are really reshaping workplace expectations, keeping it fresh for all of us, especially around total rewards and their expectations. So here's what's going to resonate with them. First off is there's definitely a desire for both the traditional and non-traditional perks. So they value things like wellness stipends, student loan support, self-care subscriptions. But they also still have a really big expectation for health benefits, PTO, retirement savings. These aren't nice to haves, these are more things that they're just expecting wherever they're working. They also have a huge focus on mental health, and they have a desire for more empathy from leadership. So it's not that they just want more time off. I often hear that when I'm talking to folks who have a large Gen Z workforce. It's that they really want to have more care for their mental health and well-being. This is something that they came into the workforce during COVID, so they were being checked on often, and now this is really an expectation for where they want to go from here. Next is flexibility. This is a non-negotiable for Gen Z. So whether it's remote work, flexible hours, autonomy, these are key for their work-life integration. They don't want their work to just fit into their life. They want it to work around their personal life. They also are coming into a time when a lot of folks have a ton of student debt. They're working against rising housing costs, and they have a lot of inflation to fight against. So adding budgeting tools, access to financial advisors, or savings programs is highly appealing to Gen Z. And last but not least is purpose-driven work. So they are really seeking organizations where they have alignment with the company values and the impact they're having on the world. So whether that's sustainability, DEIB, or social impact, making sure that they have that alignment is really important. Now, let's talk about millennials. We are now 39% of the workforce. So, like Gen Z, millennials value flexibility, personalized benefits, and meaningful work. But we're seeing that as millennials are moving into that middle stage of their career, financial security and career growth are definitely taking center stage. So, first off, I want to talk about financial stability. There are a lot of millennials who are still managing student debt, so that makes loan repayment programs and financial planning tools, just like with Gen Z, really appealing to them. And competitive pay and long-term security is also something that's a top priority for millennials as they're starting to buy houses and expand their families. Then we have work-life balance. So PTO, remote work, flexible schedules, these all help millennials feel like they're able to manage their growing personal and family responsibilities. And a trend I wanted to highlight is that there's actually a growing popularity around a few different types of programs. First off is sabbaticals, so adding these for people to take a certain amount of time off once they've reached a specific amount of tenure on the team is something that's definitely rising. And then we're also seeing more of a drive for top up and family focused leave policies really growing right now with millennials. Millennials are also very career driven and ambitious because they're in this mid stage of their career right now. So they really want upskilling opportunities, leadership pathways, and they want to be getting regular feedback so that they can stay competitive with others in their different industries. And this is one that Dane is going to touch on more, but there's a huge desire for, like Gen Z, them to have this menu style of traditional benefits because they want to make sure whatever they have, they want to make sure it fits their needs. So whether that's healthcare, retirement, wellness perks, think of this as them building their ideal sandwich. That's really, they want to have that customizability. And lastly, a big one for millennials is DEI and a purpose focus. So they want to work for companies, again, like Gen Z, that really reflect their values in the work that they're doing. So that means that DEIB goes into leadership, culture, decision making, and taking it really beyond hiring practices, as we've kind of seen in the last few years. Now, Gen X is a little bit different. They bring a totally unique set of values and priorities, and they make up about 30% of our workforce right now. So this generation is highly motivated by individual performance raises. And unlike some of the other groups that I've talked about, Gen X tends to be less focused on the values and mission of an organization, but they're a lot more focused on career growth and stability. So they prefer to work for organizations that are really have that reliable structure and have long-term security, like retirement and health-related benefits. That's what's really important. And another distinguishing factor for Gen X specifically is that they have a higher proportion of caregivers compared to any of the other generations, which is really unique and interesting when you think about what their needs are. So as a result of that, family benefits and support programs are really vital to their work-life balance. And when it comes to recognition, Gen X definitely still appreciate acknowledgement for their hard work, but it does look a little bit different from maybe what we would see for millennials or Gen Z. So they really want there to be acknowledged, but they want it to be more private and in a direct form versus public praise. So they want to be acknowledged, but they don't want the spotlight. The last generation I want to talk about are boomers. They represent 7% of our workforce, and they bring a wealth of experience and unique preferences that I think we should not be overlooking. So for boomers, base pay and retirement plans are really the most important as they're continuing to kind of move into that retirement stage. And while flexibility and work-life balance are not as important to them as maybe the younger generations, boomers definitely still appreciate being able to take themselves at the end of the day, step away, and have the time to care for themselves. Learning and development, this is a really interesting one because it does look a little bit different for boomers. So they're still seeking to upskill, but it's not really in that traditional sense. There's actually more of a desire to share their expertise and be acknowledged for all of the information that they've gathered along their way and to mentor younger generations. So if you have boomers in your workforce, I would highly encourage you to lean on them for this expert level of expertise to get them sharing. Another trend to really highlight here is that a lot of boomers are retiring later than any other previous generation, or they're working part-time into retirement. And another trend is unretiring. Not sure if any of you have heard of it, but it's essentially when folks return to the workplace after they've retired. So this is usually to make sure that they can increase their financial stability because, hey, they're living in the same economy we are, and to re-engage socially and to really make meaningful connections. So I've taken you through all of these different generations, and as a takeaway, as we're wrapping up, I really want to highlight that there's a lot of overlaps, but there's also these kind of minutiae piece of differences. And that's really similar to how we all have these unique differences within sandwiches and how we want those to taste. So it's important when you're thinking about catering your total rewards plans to think about how they need to be specific for each group. And I also want to remind you, we just went through this and I'm giving you a ton of generalized information. So it's important that this is a broad overview. And even though these are some great takeaways, asking your individual team members what's going to be meaningful for them is where you're going to get the best insight. Now, let's go into some trends to watch in 2025. So these are some things that I think we definitely want to be focused on. There is a renewed focus on employee care and mental health initiatives. This is something that I shared in my earlier slides, especially around Gen Z and millennials. So we really want to prioritize this within our teams. So first off, it's really important and essential to educate our teams on what benefits are available to them. This is something that we're seeing a lot of folks in the workplace don't actually know how to use their benefits or they're not using them to the best degree. So let's encourage them to use those. And another component that I mentioned earlier as well is we want to continue to really practice empathy and provide recognition. During COVID, like I said, we started checking in on folks. This is now an expectation. So we kind of dropped that a little bit in 2024 and it's coming back in 2025. And while we're focusing on employee care, we also really want to consider cost containment and benefits. So Dane is going to go way more in depth than I am on this, but essentially we want to offer programs that are going to help manage costs. So looking into preventative care, reducing long-term expenses, and making sure that we're providing benefits that are actually going to provide sustainable support for employees' well-being, that's really looking at how do we set them up for success down the line versus care right now. So now, lastly, but definitely not least again, is when it comes to remote or hybrid work, engagement is really important. We've seen this shift to going back into the office, and while that is great, we still need to work on engagement for our remote and hybrid employees. So this is really key. And without that face-to-face interaction, it's essential that we are really intentional about creating that connection. So if you have hybrid or remote employees, remember to utilize regular check-ins, have more communication channels using Slack, different tools, or providing remote team building activities just to make sure they're still engaged. That is my spiel for today. Now I am going to pass it over to Dane, who is going to help us zero in on benefits and how you can ensure that you have a competitive benefits plan for your team and make sure that that sandwich has a really good sense of protein within it.
Thank you, Char. I guess I'll start by saying if we were able to do this in person, I know Char's team would have grilled cheese sandwiches for every single person here. So next time maybe we do this, we can make that happen. Quick overview of my company. Won't spend a lot of time here, but just a better sense of who I am and what Informa does. So Informa has been servicing clients in the Canadian marketplace upwards of 27 years now. And my saying that genuinely makes my business partner feel old, but I had to do it anyway. Sorry, Cliff. At our core, we are an independent insurance broker specializing in employee benefits, group retirement services, executive or key person coverage, and individual insurance products. Now, just touching on a few of the things that influence our work and insights. So in addition to being brokers, meaning that we work with all major carriers, we hold the exclusive contract for Canada's largest benefits provider. That's the Chambers Plan. A couple other unique products that we sort of have in our toolbox. We have a pretty fun tool. It's an AI benchmarking software where it allows us to produce a benchmark report against roughly 15,000 companies across Canada and get pretty granular specifying industry. Bottom line, good tool for those looking to see where they are from a competitive standpoint in their industry. And finally, we're seeing more companies gravitate towards HRIS or Human Resource Information System solutions, allowing you to house benefits, payroll, HR function under one roof. And we're broker partners with the two of those, including Rippling. Okay. Well, let's get into it. What is good service around benefits management? I think a concept or thought that not many people really consider. And, at the end of the day here, to be clear, the slide is not about questioning the competence of your broker. That's not my goal here. My goal is to focus on what truly defines good service in the benefits world. Whether you're evaluating your current provider or simply looking for ways to maximize value, it's just worth knowing the key qualities and actions that a good broker should bring to the table. So let's start with compliance expertise. This might feel a little benefits 101 for some of you that manage plans, but I think it's good to get a reminder here and there. At the more basic level, do you as the individual who manages the plan have an understanding of what a late entrance is? Have a look at the above graphic. Late entrants are kind of the thorn in the side of any plan administrator. Not the hardest thing to manage with an organized system in place, but as some of you know, late entrants have to jump through hoops to qualify for coverage. Medical questionnaires, $250 dental caps for 12 months. It's simply a concept that you should have a strong understanding of when running a plan. That is key. Plan participation, I'd say this one is pretty overlooked, to be frank. Plan participation matters. Generally, any company over 10 full-time employees would have a typically 75% participation rate for all full-time staff. Now, it's worth considering the worst case scenario here. Like, say, knock on wood, an employee were to pass away, worst case scenario, and the employee's family were to expect a life insurance payout from the plan. If the insurance company, upon investigation, perhaps through a payroll audit, found that you were not enrolling 3/4 of full-time staff, they could potentially deny a life insurance payout and the family could seek compensation. So have I seen that happen? No. But Technically, participation requirements would be in the firm or employer application when it's signed. So I think it's a very important thing to flag. For example, BC Fair Pharmacare, we'll touch on this a little bit. Among those who use the healthcare system in the past year, almost half described the experience as extremely or somewhat difficult. BC's medical systems can be very complex, especially when factoring in account fair pharmacare coverage, where relevant, between navigating fair pharmacare qualifications, the deductibles, and potential special authorization drugs. Pharmacare is a complicated world, but ultimately it offers valuable coverage for things like diabetic supplies, mental health conditions, and medical supplies. And one more piece here on compliance. Plan continuity. More of a tip than anything, but did you know that you can extend a benefits plan, specifically health and dental, up to 6 months after termination of employee? Also, just FYI, mat leave, pat leave, that's a statutory leave. You legally have to continue covering health and dental at the existing employee cost split. And more generally, around plan continuity, including cases around transitions, let's say, between EI, sick leave, and potentially long-term disability. I've been able to connect clients with Beacon to assist as scenarios become very nuanced with the need for an expert HR advice. And one more thought, if an employee is disabled, are you going to continue paying their health and dental? You should have an internal policy in place that states for how long, when, and if, many things that have to be considered when running a plan. So plan options, sort of cost management here. So to me, good service has to entail what a broker can bring to the table overall. You need to have the full range of offerings and relationships with carriers. And generally for small business, you need to consider the pooled plan options, something like the Chambers plan I alluded to earlier. A pooled plan means your risk is spread out, less volatility and more stability in your rates. Now for high claiming groups, it can be a great option. And without the need to actually share your plan usage with the carrier before getting an offer. It's a very unique piece of, in some pooled plans. Now, if you get to a certain size, let's say 60 plus employees, what about just being your own bank on dental coverage? It simply makes sense to self-insure your dental the vast majority of the time. You're able to pay for your own dental claims through administrative services only, acronym being ASO. There's no such thing as a catastrophic dental claim, right? It's not like extended health claims, which can range between big prescription drugs or medical supplies. You can eliminate the ever-increasing dental premium and the 12% annual inflationary factors attached. Nothing changes from the employee's perspective. It's simply the way you fund your coverage. And finally, the last piece on this slide here, does a broker advocate for you? Like really the idea is that when the going gets tough, do they go above and beyond? Your broker should be there to find answers when you can't get them or don't have time to get them yourself. Do you have a staff member who simply isn't getting a claim paid out? A broker in their team, when needed, should be able to step in and help get this across the line. It truly should be an ongoing and collaborative relationship, and one in which you can truly lean on when unsure where to go. Oh boy, okay, we're starting with a really bad ChatGPT joke here, but it ties in nicely. Why did the benefits plan go to market in January? Because it heard it's the only time premiums aren't springing up. I genuinely apologize for including that. Okay, number one, rising costs, unfavorable renewal rates. Pretty self-explanatory, but like the number one reason any company is going to market, it's because of rates. Rule of thumb states that you should go to market every 3 to 5 years. That said, in some cases, it may be more frequent. At the end of the day, a broker will likely take your order and go to market if that's what you want. But it should be pointed out that if you went to market every year and marketed your plan every year for 3 years in a row or more, you would probably start to get declines from insurance providers, especially if the main idea is to simply leverage better rates with no intention of actually switching. Nothing really wrong with that, but the carriers do note this. And because it feels like the best place to slide this in, I would say if you're switching carriers potentially, you're looking at doing a benefits change, in order to capture potential cost savings by switching carriers, your renewal should be negotiated well in advance of your actual renewal date. If your plan is blowing up potentially, then the more lead time, the better. That way you have enough time to honor the 30-day cancellation period that pretty much every carrier has, and potentially capture a full 12 months of savings versus switching over a month late or 2 months late and not getting the full advantage of switching carriers and the discount. Secondly, employee dissatisfaction. Is your staff happy? Now, happiness can perhaps come in a few different forms when it comes to a benefits plan. Are they happy with the plan design, the overall offering? If you cost split, are they happy with the rates? If you aren't listening and addressing needs, you may appear out of touch with employee priorities. Without setting unrealistic expectations with staff, work on a high-level benefit survey, one that is very deliberately worded. Try to identify gaps. Not everyone speaks up without being asked. It shows you care and are looking to address needs. Now, if you are going to market and you're mulling over an attractive option, it certainly does make it a little easier for, maybe you or your HR and people ops team, whoever's managing the plan, when they can dangle a little carrot for their staff. So idea being a small enhancement in plan design helps justify what, can be viewed as a bit of a nuisance to switch carriers. That said, I would say with digital enrollment, it is a bit more manageable these days. But perhaps with the help of your broker, a nice clear announcement and FAQ letter for staff can lay out how the employee and their family can seamlessly move from one carrier to another. Thirdly, timing your benefits review, maximizing opportunities, changing demographics. What do you think as an organization the next 6 to 12 months look like? Headcount likely stagnant, perhaps growing at a low rate, or perhaps ramping up or scaling? Where industry relevant? Are you gearing up for a funding round? All factors that can help dictate when and if a business chooses to go to market. Going back to what Char was speaking to earlier, also, I'll work with startups pre-seed or seed range where they want to implement something very simple and cost-effective in the, quote unquote, early days, like a health spending account, an HSA. In time, things change. Perhaps the business has gone from an average age of 26 to 35, yet you haven't addressed the shifting needs. You're starting to hire more families. Your prospective hires are asking about your remote work policy. No longer are you addressing the basic needs of an occasional massage or dental cleaning for that of like a 26-year-old. These needs changed. And finally, this is just something I'm noticing, as a whole, speaking from experience, carriers are more aggressive now than I've really ever seen. Extended rate guarantees on health and dental plans, rate caps on renewals are more and more common. Rate caps meaning the monthly premium of your plan can only increase up to a certain percentage at renewal. For example, 10%, 12%, or 15% rate caps. Do note that most carriers have like some fine print on their rate caps. Maybe your demographics can't change 15 to 25% or more. But if you have generally favorable claims, like you aren't seeing 15 or 20% or more increases each year, then you will likely have carriers battling over your business. And with that come guarantees. So in a sense, yes, carriers are out there trying to, buy your business by giving you, in some cases, deeply discounted rates. But at the end of the day, when those have sustainable guarantees attached, these are absolutely real offers that have to be considered. Okay, diving into traditional benefits and how they've evolved. Okay, so what are employee benefits traditionally? For the next 5 minutes, let's go back in time and really dive into benefits during the Great Depression. I'm kidding. I would never do that too. Instead, let's please direct your attention to Pat Sajak and the AI-generated wheel of benefits, okay? Little custom AI Sajak. I had to throw Pat Sajak in there. What I've done is laid out 8 aspects of a traditional benefits plan. You might say wellness is relatively recent. It's been around since the 90s, so I included it. This wheel takes into consideration disability, critical illness, dental, extended health, life insurance, wellness, flex, spending, and retirement savings plan. Certainly all aspects of a plan that we still see today, and in that sense, nothing new. It's just a matter of scope. But it should be acknowledged that there have been some positive changes and advancements within the industry, many of which are quite recent. Now, when it came, back in the day, to overall mentality around traditional extended health and dental plans, very much reactive in nature. Concentration was on things like prescription drugs, vision care, and somewhat limited dental offerings. Certainly, there was a lack of emphasis on digital wellness with little to no integration, really no technology at all, aside from simple claims processing. It was also the expectation back in the day that employers would pick up 100% of the benefits plan. Not to get ahead of ourselves, I mean, speaking in terms of next slides, but today's world, employees often have skin in the game. 80-20 splits are quite common, or structures that optimize payor around the taxable benefits. There's arguably more of a financial burden than ever when it comes to owning a business. Rising costs and wages, employer health tax, to name a few. I'll often get asked, what's a fair split for my staff? My answer is generally the same, case by case. Totally depends on your budget and cash flow and sometimes industry. Plans back in the day very much developed and based around traditional family structures, nuclear family and distinct gender roles. That's kind of the idea. So, yeah, things have changed, needless to say. Some of this will tie back to what we heard from Char around the shift in desires of employees in 2025. But let's start with the general idea of going from a reactive to a preventative or preventive benefits plan. So one piece that I really utilized for my research, and just each year Benefit Canada, they release a annual healthcare survey result. One of the big takeaways from the 2024 release was the idea that there needs to be a general shift in mindset and to start treating the benefits plan as a preventative wellness tool. And this is kind of a new area of thinking I find very interesting. Preventative care means you should get improved productivity from your staff as they can better deal with chronic conditions, healthier and more engaged, greater morale. So what does preventative care look like on a benefits plan? This would come through access to resources, services, support systems. Take a health risk assessment, great tool. HRAs for short can help people understand their risk factors and suggest lifestyle changes to improve health. HRAs can include measurements for blood pressure, heart rate, height, weight, testing for cholesterol, blood sugar levels. And many of the major carriers offer HRAs built into their platforms for free right now. Manulife, Canada Life, Blue Cross, Green Shield, they all have this. I mean, we are seeing businesses incentivize healthy living and behaviors, programs for weight management, physical activity, smoking cessations, access to steps challenges, virtual fitness, gym memberships. I mean, ultimately, with the uptick in adoption around digital wearables and tracking, makes these platforms very accessible. Now, really, I mean, I think the overarching idea here is and should be treat the problem, not the symptom. Not to say the one-size-fits-all model, which Char sort of alluded to, isn't still somewhat prominent in insurance plans, but there's no doubt that there's been far greater emphasis placed on individualization for each person on a plan. Now, based on this graph, why the shift of dollars away from the traditional plan? I mean, a few reasons: cost management, impact of inflation on plan effectiveness, increased use of benefits. Don't get me wrong, like there's absolutely still a place for the insured plan. At the end of the day, it's insurance, and some onus should be placed on the provider when it comes to things like prescription drugs, life insurance, long-term disability. That's the one thing an allocation of flex dollars isn't going to address. That's the catastrophic health piece, which ties back to recognizing your demographics at the end of the day. If an employee is disabled, are you going to continue paying their salary? You have to look at the whole picture, kind of zoom out. And again, this all ties back to the concept of the entire webinar itself. Now, moving on to the flex and wellness program. So in terms of what health spending and wellness accounts bring to the table, what we are seeing is companies carving out their HSA and or wellness via a specialized third-party provider. So reason being, generally, more robust wellness categories than the major players. The ability to create classes within your employee base, and typically lower utilization by staff when you remove the flex account from the traditional benefits carrier. And how is that a win? Well, you can typically now take your allocation and probably enhance it because your usage has gone down. So what we're seeing is kind of like with a third-party provider, and something companies are doing is allocating wellness dollars strictly for one dedicated purpose. Like here's 1,000 for mental health, maybe 500 for travel expenses, another 500 for fitness, can only be used for those pieces. Moving on in the second sort of slides here in terms of what's changed. Not mentioning anything groundbreaking when I say mental health discussion and the conversation around it isn't going anywhere, but some interesting stats here. So alluding to the 2024 Canada Benefits Survey, this year was the first time that employees were asked about each of their social, financial, and workplace health to capture a more complete picture of overall wellness. The connection between social and mental health is clear. Poor mental health was higher among those who reported poor social health at 49%. On the financial front, finances are the top stressor of employees, and the rate continues to increase. Within workplace health, 53% of those with poor mental health felt their workplace didn't adequately support their mental well-being. So from a benefit standpoint, what's happening? Across the board with traditional benefit plans, we've in the past seen coverage for psychologists and social workers. That bucket has expanded significantly in recent years to include registered clinical counselors, certified clinical counselors, registered psychotherapists, clinical therapists, marriage and family therapists. That's just to name a few. The bucket is vastly, vastly greater than it once was. And, you know, what about employee assistance programs? This is likely a refresher for many of you, but EAPs offer confidential short-term counseling and support for families dealing with stress, work-life balance issues, and personal challenges. Most of the major EAP providers today, Homewood Health, Inkblot, Lumino, TELUS, Arete, probably ones you've heard of. include, almost all of them, resources on financial, legal, nutritional counseling, more specifically around mental health. And aside from the array of counseling topics you could access, whether in person, virtual, or telephonic, there's a variety of digital wellness resources, workshops, seminars, and workplace support for managers. Moving on to the last piece there. So shifting gears. So with respect to the family dynamics, ultimately, yeah, there's been a shift in a couple different ways, like legal, economic, and cultural. Legal, we're seeing same-sex marriages, cohabitating couples, other perhaps non-traditional agreements. Economically, dual income households are increasingly the norm. Culturally, diverse family forms, blended families, same-sex families. And from the perspective of the benefits plan, as Char alluded to, emphasis on DEIB, we are seeing gender affirmation coverage as a built-in piece on plans and more inclusive family options, including some pretty robust fertility treatments, like often up to 15K or more. And it should be noted while we're talking fertility, as of now, and you might know, the first cycle of IVF and medications will be covered under a publicly funded initiative starting April of this year, just FYI. Okay, as I alluded to, some really, really bad ChatGPT jokes. ChatGPT, when you generate an image, they like spell the words wrong. So I made a joke about that, and that's what they think the future looks like anyway. Okay, so chronic diseases. This is one of the biggest sort of 2025, what's on the horizon for talking about trends. Why is it so important that we find better ways to help employees address chronic disease? Because it, of course, has a direct correlation with presenteeism. The big piece here with chronic pain is that it often leads to other diseases, and perhaps most notably, mental health issues like depression and anxiety. So on one hand, of course, as business owners and plan administrators, we want to see that our employees get the most beneficial treatment they can, of course. But how can this be done in a way that doesn't potentially jeopardize the sustainability of the plan? Plan members are using prescriptions the most out of any benefits. It's the biggest cost driver for plan sponsors. Chronic conditions account for 72% of private drug plan claims. Within that group, the top three classes are antidiabetics, autoimmune disease treatments, and antipsychotics. Drugs in Canada are now the third most expensive amongst all OECD countries. This one's shocking. Like 1 in 5 Canadians are actually skipping doses because of cost. It's a real problem. I mean, I think something that really highlights this is the most interesting example of is the onset of GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy, traditionally diabetic supplies. So take this stat. 10% of the adult population in Canada uses a GLP type 1 drug like Ozempic or Wegovy. Millennials at the highest, in fact, at 12%. Naturally, the question might be how many people are using these GLP-1 drugs off-label, so not for intended purpose or not for the initially intended purpose. One of the largest Ozempic studies to date, just from a few weeks ago, in fact, found there is a link to treating addiction disorder. It can help curb smoking, for example. Additionally, Ozempic can lower risk for heart disease, stroke, kidney disease, even Alzheimer's. Positives aside, what does it mean for benefit plans? I mean, of course, employers are excited to provide weight loss drug coverage as part of a, generally weight loss management program. But at what cost? Most insurance companies have placed restrictions on the use of this drug. To obtain coverage, you have to prove that you are taking this drug for its intended purpose. And to complicate it more, you can even run this through potentially a lifestyle drug. So the question is, you need to consider as a plan sponsor, what's your philosophy around weight management drugs? And do you want to see that classified as a lifestyle drug that you can cover for staff? Big question. On the financial piece, one of the biggest stressor for staff has been alluded to throughout the webinar. Financial health is, one of the pieces around treating the whole employee: financial, physical, workplace, emotional. There's no bigger stressor than financial. Char hit on some points earlier about what actions an employer can take today to help encourage employee savings. Consider developing and dispersing resources to help employees utilize their retirement plans, arrange for access to professional financial planners, offer debt management assistance, and adapt work arrangements to better cater to the aging workers. This can only boost engagement and build employee loyalty. As mentioned, unretiring or phased retirement, hot topic. Recognizing this should help employers gain a strategic advantage in the markets. And just quickly here, let's talk about consider the days of defined benefit pension plans. Those are gone. It's all about capital accumulation plans where employees get to choose their investments, and a group RSP would fall under this. Top advice for Canadian workers, take advantage of your company retirement savings plan. Make sure your staff are well aware of the advantages if you have one. Receive tax deductions on each paycheck. Economies of scale. Lower fund management fees mean you have a bigger take home at the end of the day. Your returns are greater than walking into a bank solo. It's free money. At least match your company contribution to get that full value. As per previous slide, what are deferred profit sharing plans, DPSPs? They've been around since the 90s, but a great investment vehicle to pair up with an RSP. In a nutshell, they're structured in tandem with the group RSP. Only the employer contributes to the DPSP and employee to the RSP. Advantage for employers, contributions do not attract payroll tax. The ability for DPSP contributions to vest for employees after 2 years of employment versus immediately. Great retention tool. Ability to tie contributions to company profits. You can skip a year of contributions if it's a down year. From the employee perspective, nothing really changes. All the same advantages that you would have under a group RSP. All right, last slide, and then we'll get into questions here. You know AI would come up, right? AI had to come up. That's obviously on the top of everyone's mind. And when it comes to benefits, I don't think people really know where that's going. So analytics, business owners love to know what sort of ROI they're getting on any investment, and that would include their healthcare plans. AI should be able to better predict future cost drivers. What about enrolling staff? What's the next logical evolution when it comes to enrolling in your plan? It'll come in the form of advanced and personalized recommendation, not dissimilar to what you might see from a music streaming platform. It's going to be like Spotify. It's really a basically it's going to be a smart enrollment feature. What about booking processes? More accessible via text message versus phone or computer, essentially scheduling on-demand appointments. We will likely see click and mortar instead of brick and mortar options, which would combine digital and in-person care. The pandemic allowed us to see that methods thought to be previously ineffective, such as telemedicine, were in fact really effective in a virtual environment. And that's what we're sort of looking at. From a diagnostic perspective, arguably the most important piece of the AI advancement will revolve around how we treat and diagnose. Imagine technology-enabled screening powered by machine learning that checks people's health, assesses underlying determinants of your health, and informs patients how they can navigate healthcare barriers. On the whole, given that many of us are already using wearable devices, the use of smart devices in healthcare is logical. AR is already being used to treat diabetes by analyzing continuous glucose monitors and insulin pumps. So the next 5 years likely concentrated on expanding the type of health and lifestyle-related benefits and on maximizing health, productivity, quality of life. Quickly to wrap us up, the National Pharmacare Program, which was initially announced in October of 2024. Can't say for certain it's going to proceed. I would imagine it does. The general idea behind a National Pharmacare is to ensure that all Canadians have access to necessary prescriptions and medications, regardless of their location and financial situation. At its core, it's about accessibility, affordability, appropriate use, and universal coverage, what leverages a single payer system. The initial phases of Bill 6064 will concentrate on access for all Canadians to contraception and diabetes treatment. The government also announced a fund to support access to supplies and devices, and that will be about $1.5 billion from 2024 to 2029 put towards the National Fair Pharmacare Program. Okay.
Amazing. Thank you, Dane. That was great information. I feel like even though I knew what you were presenting on, I had some good insights and takeaways from that. So that was great. Now we are going to be jumping into some questions. So I am going to stop sharing my screen. If anyone has any questions, you can put them into the chat and we're happy to answer them. One of the ones we got before the session, so we're going to jump into that one first, and that was, all right. So this is, I think, one around Beacon HR and how we partner with Dane and Informa. So when we work with, how do you work with internal teams? What kind of work do you do? And when should we partner with a benefits broker? So happy to speak to that very quickly in a nutshell. So essentially how that would work and how we work with internal teams is we come in and we join. We're an extension of your internal team. We come in, we evaluate what you're doing, and specifically around what we're talking about today with total rewards, we would talk about what are you doing for work-life integration, culture, learning and development, compensation, and essentially we would frame up what are your offerings and what can we improve going forward, and then we would work on a strategy from there. Where we would leverage Dane is bringing him into the process of let's review our benefits offering and make sure that we're offering something that's really going to get into the nitty gritty and making sure it's personalized to what your employees want. So that's a little bit about that question, but jumping back into now, do we have any questions in the chat?
We so far have a comment. Claire's comment, I had the same reaction to this one, Dane. Claire said, just to make sure I heard that correctly, did Dane just say 10% of people in Canada are using GLP-1 drugs?
Yeah, I did, believe it or not, Claire. So just to put that in perspective, that's about 900, that's between 900,000 and 1.4 million people in Canada using a GLP-1 drug. Whether, of course, that's whether it's for intended use off-label or a combination of weight loss and diabetes, which is becoming, I think that's the big question, is people going to take it for a dual use purpose versus just one of the two? Because again, as I said, there's been some significant findings around some really big positives for people who are taking this drug, when it's off brand. So there'll be continuing dialogue on this, I can guarantee, for a long time.
That's great. Okay, another question for Dane from Diane. Dane, given the needs of multi-generational workforces, what suggestions do you have when setting up a simple benefits plan for a small or medium-sized business?
Yeah, I mean, I do zoom out, like I'll get an employee census, I'll look at it, I'll see what the age range generally is. I think it was clear through a lot of that presentation that like I'm a big proponent for spending accounts. Really from a budgetary perspective, it feels like your dollars are going longer. It's the flexibility for staff to choose where they want those funds to go. But I also think there's absolutely still a place for the insured plan because, as I mentioned, like to me, being able to take care of your employees if something catastrophic happens is huge. So like if I'm setting up a plan, regardless almost of the workforce, I look at it a way to make sure it's going to at least have some life insurance, some disability, maybe some critical illness. Of course, that's not the main concern of someone in their 26, 27 range, right? But those things can happen at any time. Injury, cancer, those don't wait for anyone. So I think having the catastrophic coverage on a plan is important. And if you want to, budget a little more, you don't have to have the extended health plan, the dental plan within the actual traditional plan. You can have a flex account to take care of that. But in that way, you're taken care of if something catastrophic happens, and then you still have your flex dollars to take care of your more user benefits like practitioners, seeing a mental health specialist, getting your dental work done. So I think there's a fine balance. But either way, like it's very much, it should be a matter of looking at the demographics. But I think that sort of tied structure is probably most beneficial for a lot of companies. Again, sometimes they just want a health spending account and that's good enough for them. But I think it's important that they're at least educated on what a full picture, full scope does look like.
100%. And I think one of the things that I often think is the most important is just like that personalization piece that people want to know you're caring for them and that you're thinking about really what their needs are, like you said. So yeah, that's great insight. Any other questions? Char, what are some unique total reward offerings that you've seen for Millennial and Gen Z? Yeah, I think there's so many different ones. I think a really big trend, like I was speaking to earlier, is this desire for flexibility, especially from Gen Z, that I've heard a lot of people struggling with. So I think some of the unique things that you can do as offerings are really thinking about, okay, and they're kind of low-hanging fruit is the easiest thing about a lot of these are, like flexible work schedules. How are you making sure that people are actually able to build their life around what they're doing? So I would say in terms of like what actually Gen Z and millennials are looking for, it is a lot of that flexibility piece and even offering remote opportunities. And this is just an easy creative one around, giving people the chance to work remotely from another country for 3 months of the year, all of those different things. And then also speaking to going back to the sabbaticals piece, I think that's something that I've seen at a few different organizations work really well. So essentially when employees get to, let's say, 3 or 5 years at an organization, giving them a 1 or 2 month sabbatical that they're able to go on, it's paid, they're taking that time off, and it makes them excited because how often, unless you're in an actual job gap, do you get that time off to go and enjoy being somewhere else without having to hop online and work? Yeah, and then Veronica, you've asked what the most above and beyond total reward strategies have we seen for Gen Z and millennials? I think I spoke just to that. I think the specifically for total rewards, it seems to be those things around sabbaticals are kind of like, I would say, the biggest groundbreaking news for me. Dane, do you have any insights for anything you've heard from your partners?
I think a lot of it's just, yeah, around some perks. I mean, we're seeing, I think it's been pretty commonplace, Matt and Pat leave. Those are extended leaves, salary continuation for things like that. I mean, even continuity on benefits from my perspective, like, if you're letting someone go, paying them health and dental for an extended period of time. A lot of companies I'm seeing are offering volunteer days and potentially paid ones, up to 3 to 5, days a year even. So things like that, it really, I mean, again, it's supporting the person, supporting what their passions are, like volunteering, and giving them days off to do that. I think high level is you can get creative with some of those things.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, I have a question from Amy as well. When we allow workers to work in different countries, what are the best practices to navigate tax purposes, benefits, work schedules? Yeah, happy to speak to that. So it's actually great. So when you're working and you have all of your employees set up from Canada, you're able to have them work for 3 months of the year in any country. So that's like something that is totally accessible if you add that into your policy. So a lot of ways that we write that in is just saying, if it's beyond 3 months, then that will create different issues. We can't necessarily support that unless they have a specific visa, or we're going to have to set them up with being able to be paid within that country. But before that 3 months, that works great. We're able to support with that. And then we can also help them navigating things like, how do we support them getting a work visa in that country? Or, with work scheduling as well. It's just making sure, once again, not one size fits all, but that something is going to work for that individual employee. So it may work different. Let's say you have someone who's providing support continuously. It may be challenging to have them working from, let's say, Australia, if they're supporting a Canadian workforce. But if they're working in a different structure, so if someone is working in a development role, they may easily be able to move and work in that different time zone. So not a one size fits all approach for that one.
Yeah, I'll touch on that one too. Look, Amy's question specifically. So yeah, it's unfortunately the benefit piece when if you're going out of Canada, it, for lack of a better term, collapses. I mean, if you're going to the States, like we have a cross-border benefits company we work with in the US. So if you do have a cohort or a separate entity in the States, we'll often connect them with that US broker. But there's not a lot you can do with respect to taking Canadian benefits and extending them out to different countries. It's really like we can help on the US side, but outside of that, it's a very much to sort of have to navigate. And then Andrea asking about the sabbatical policy. So yeah, Andrea, like I know we are emailing on this a little bit. A lot of it is, for how long, what type of sabbatical policy in terms of how long that person's going to be away for, and really whether or not you feel like the company can justify paying for a certain amount of time. So it's really going to come down to the schedule and just how flexible you want to be for your staff. So we can definitely talk about that offline a little more, but I'll have some more thoughts on that.
Amazing. And we are right on time. So we'll take that as the last question. Dane and Char, thank you so much. That was incredible. So much great learning and insights. We will send a follow-up email out to everyone by end of this week. Sneak peek, a couple offers, couple gives in there. Dane is offering for attendees of this webinar, he's offering a complimentary benefits review and analysis. Really, really great tool. I highly recommend you take him up on that offer. Part of our team is based in Vancouver, and our next in-person event and speaker panel is happening next week. So as an attendee, we'd love to invite you to join. That's featuring speakers Sean Hewitt from Wavy, Balkis Hassan from Live CA, and Louisa Anciano from Sanctuary AI. And then that email will also have a whole bunch of other great resources for you. Thanks so much, everyone. We're right on time. Really appreciate you joining us, and have a fantastic rest of your week. Please feel free to reach out if you have any more questions.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you. Appreciate you all.